Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel, More Than a Google Search, Leveraging Opposition Research for Success in 2024. My name is Alyssa Batchelor-Causey. I'm the CEO of Hill and State Strategies. We are an opposition research firm that puts knowledge into actionable insights for Democrats. I am so happy to be here with you all today. The purpose of this panel is we really wanted to highlight what opposition research is, how it has changed and evolved over the years, and what you can expect for 2024 and going into 2024. So I'm extremely excited to be joined here today with some industry veterans. First, Sonia from Stanford Campaigns, based in Austin, Texas, and Taylor Holst from Jones Mandel in DC and San Francisco, correct? California. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you both so much for being here today. Taylor, I think you're on mute.
Oh, apologies for that.
Okay, great. So I wanted to start off today by opening kind of with a definition of opposition research, especially for anyone who is maybe in their early career and maybe isn't too familiar with this side of the industry. So there's a lot of rhetoric that gets thrown around with what opposition research is, but it really is the aggregation of publicly available data on opposition, on your opposition and your political opponents, and then letting the voters know about the record of the opponent and letting them make a choice and decide. We're also joined here by Alan from Nesbitt and Parinello. Hi, Alan. It's nice for you to join us. He is are you in Virginia or in California?
I'm in California. I live in Humboldt County.
Okay, great. So from California. Perfect. So let's just jump in here. I want to start with kind of the narrative around opposition research and maybe demystifying that a little bit. Industry outsiders have often described opposition research with a negative connotation. Do you think that connotation has changed over the last few years, given the challenging political climate we're in? And Sonia, I'll start with you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Yeah, I think that the sort of perception of opposition research has changed a whole lot, especially in the last few years. When I first started doing this about 15 years ago, there were a lot of campaigns who were very, very reticent to hire anyone for opposition research because it was unseemly. It was sordid and dirty. And we're going to run an issues-based campaign, and we're going to win this purely on the merits of me being awesome as a candidate. And to all of those candidates, what can I say? I'm sorry we couldn't get you across the finish line. But I appreciate that. 15, 20 years ago, opposition research had a reputation for being just dirt digging and mudslinging and unkind and ungentlemanly. And I think with Donald Trump bursting onto the scene the way he did, and all of these other campaigns and candidates following his lead, it is no longer something that you do in the shadows to make sure your bases are covered. It is 100%, without question, something that is required of successful campaigns. It is just due diligence. It is doing your homework. It is fully understanding what is the landscape, what am I trying to say? What are the major factors that can help to sway a narrative so that you, at the end of the day, are the person with more votes? It's just good business. You wouldn't do so many things. You don't buy a house without doing research. You don't pick a daycare without doing research. You don't choose a school to send your children to without doing research. This is just the examination of publicly available records to make sure that you have every tool at your disposal, ready to go to make the case for why you are the stronger candidate.
Absolutely. Alan, I'd love to hear from you and to share your thoughts as another industry veteran.
Yeah, I definitely second Sonia's sentiments here. So much, for candidate campaigns especially, I would argue that probably half, and probably more than half, of what we do, is in the positive direction. Right. Certainly when it comes to, especially campaigns that engage us for research on their own candidate, which is most of the hard side campaigns. Mm-hmm. We, most of the comms, or most of the paid comms certainly, that you're going to be doing is going to be about your own candidate. So, most of the research is going to be in that direction, and most of the, the follow-up and fact-checking and all that kind of stuff is going to be about your own candidate, and certainly for any, or most of the successful campaigns. So what I always try and teach folks is that the research sort of follows the paid spending, and that is generally going to be in the positive direction. So most of the research is therefore going to be in the positive direction. So, and I think that's by and large helped help move the perception of what it is that we do, in the direction of in a positive direction.
Absolutely. And Taylor, I know that you maybe haven't been in opposition research as long as Sonia and Alan. Just in the time that you've been in the research space, how have you seen the shift of public perception in opposition research?
Yeah, well, I would absolutely echo what both Sonia and Alan said. I think they're both spot on. I also think one thing we've seen, especially in the post-Trump era, is the idea that a single gaffe is not enough. A candidate simply saying something and it getting through one news cycle and moving on in a couple of days is not enough to tank or make a campaign at this point. And that's why opposition research becomes so much more important. It's not looking for that silver bullet. It's not looking for something that can land once and then you can kind of dust your hands off and you're done with the work. Some of it is just nerdy, boring stuff of digging through news clips and thousands of pages of court documents or what have you. But it's important because a single story isn't enough to land anymore. And there's so much information out there that our role as sort of the people keeping things on the level and making sure that things can hold up to scrutiny has become all the more important in recent years.
Absolutely. But this actually, speaking of the post-Trump era and, how opposition research has been viewed, I guess, by people who are in the non-political space. There was a lot of criticism of opposition research kind of post-2022. We saw with kind of George Santos and others kind of get elected in 2020 and in 2022. The New Republic put out a piece called "The End of Opposition Research?" With regards to George Santos and his contradictory tweets. So can you... I'll ask this to Alan first. Do you think that this is a credible view, and what do you think the media maybe gets wrong or misunderstands about opposition research and what the work actually entails?
That's a good question. I don't have much visibility into the Santos race. I haven't worked in that race or that district, but I think the media probably, well, they definitely, number one, do not understand, or at least do not write about. Some investigative reporters almost certainly would understand the amount and the volume of the amount of work and the sort of volume of data and information that we ingest to do sort of what would be a full and complete investigation of a given candidate. So it probably doesn't make for a super great or interesting reporting. So I think they usually sort of gloss over that, for the sake of the story. So they certainly pass by just how much work goes into one of these. I mean, a decent sized congressional or a statewide, could easily be hundreds of people hours of work and, untold thousands, hundreds of thousands of pages, of information and data that gets ingested into these things. So I think that tends to get glossed over. And then, I don't know. I think, in the Santos race, I don't actually need, from what I understand, not everything was actually missed. And the stuff that was captured, it was simply not a race that, at least in terms of paid communications, that folks were, going to spend a truckload of money on. And then it turns out that, by some fluke, he ended up winning. And then all of the things that were not all that noteworthy when they were just sitting in a research book were all of a sudden super noteworthy. Right. So, I think it's part of the equation has to be what you actually do anything with the findings? Somebody besides us, researchers on this actual call, has to go and read this stuff. There's only so much. We try and speak through our research books, and if nobody is there to hear it, then you end up with George Santos. So.
Absolutely. And, speaking of, actually, I'll go to Sonia. Do you have anything to add there on George Santos? Or really just the media perception. It's less so much about George Santos in particular, but he's just an illustration, I think a good one, of where this kind of conversation in the media came up.
There was as an opposition researcher, I can't tell you the number of questions I immediately fielded from people. How did we go so wrong? What was the problem? How did this happen? Who was that researcher who obviously dropped the ball? Let me go ahead and just put the kibosh on that. There are many, many reasons why there seem to be opposition research failures. And I'm using that term very, very loosely, because a lot of things can go wrong. And we've already talked about a few of them. Number one, it wasn't a tier 1 race. Nobody was paying attention. So it doesn't matter if a lot of times we can find truly horrific things on people, but because it's not a well-funded race, they don't have the money to get that out, to push that, to lean on that narrative. And even if they do, a lot of times journalists, it's not an especially interesting race. I think it was an R+8 or R+7 district, something like that. So, it was sort of going to be a wash anyway. So there wasn't a lot of focus paid on the race to begin with. And then we get into the fact that researchers are, for better or for worse, we are hired guns, and, a lot of times we get paid to do just enough. And that is not necessarily the fault of the campaign. God knows it is hard to raise dollars for campaigns. And every dollar that you spend on opposition research is a dollar you are not spending on your paid comms program. So I appreciate that many, many times we are not hired to do these heavy duty deep dives that require travel to law libraries or travel to municipalities or what have you. And so, we do the best we can with the time and the money and the resources we are allotted. But, there are a lot of ways that a George Santos situation can happen. Now, fortunately, they don't happen often, because it's pretty infrequent that an absolute crazy case like George Santos comes along. But yeah, this is generally the portion of the panel where I really want to underscore that the earlier you do opposition research and the more thoroughly you do it, the less likely you are to run into these kinds of situations. And that's a hard thing, I know, because early on in a campaign, when you are just getting your fundraising wheels and apparatus up and running, sometimes a $20,000 book is not something you want to drop coin on. I guarantee you by the end of that race, $20,000 is going to look like a rounding error in some of these congressional and statewide races. But it's a difficult thing to spend right out of the gate. But yeah, if I take nothing away, if I do nothing else that is of value in this particular panel, I will say that early money spent on research is an incredible investment. And the earlier you do it, number one, the sooner you know what you're going to be dealing with. And number two, you're probably going to get a better deal, because opposition researchers early on in the cycle are not super busy. We'll probably give you a deal. Anyway, I will leave it at that.
Excellent. And Taylor, I kind of want to understand your perspective, from the media. Do you think that the media gets it wrong? Is there a difference? Is there a difference in kind of the way that investigative journalists, in your perspective, not factually, but from your perspective, handle it versus other kind of media fodder, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the interesting thing about the Santos story in part is the question of if it would have even mattered if this got out before. Would people have cared that much? Sonia mentioned it just was not a very big race. There were much more interesting things going on in that regard, and people just might not have been interested in the story even if it got out there. And nationally, we enjoy the salaciousness of it, the scandal. This guy got elected. He's not just running, he got elected. That's what made the story so interesting and made it really take off. And others have mentioned, a research team doesn't exist in a vacuum. Simply because we find things does not mean they're going to get out there, does not mean that a campaign is going to be able to craft the perfect message to get people to care, to get people to stick. I've lost count of how many hits we had that we thought were just amazing and they were going to blow up. And then maybe we got them published and it didn't really go anywhere. Maybe a bunch of reporters just turned it down anyway. So I think it really underscores the importance of having a research team be part of the core team of a campaign throughout the process of a race, not just completing that initial book and turning it over. We can do everything we can to gather as much information and hope it gets read, but staying on as a consultant, continuing to provide that insight as the people who saw the primary sources, I think is something that, a lot of campaigns would really benefit from, keeping the research team on and keeping that expertise, because it really is the backbone of a campaign's information environment. And kind of acknowledging that earlier on can help stories like this not happen, and can kind of hopefully help prevent future Santos and future scandals, because people don't quite understand just how important that research team is beyond the final deliverable.
Absolutely. And, kind of speaking to this era of disinformation and candidates that may be less than stellar, since kind of post 2016, and I'll start with you, Alan, how do you think that living in this era of disinformation and misinformation and conspiracy theories and alternative facts has changed your approach to opposition research and the work?
I don't think it has, at least for us, I don't think it has changed our approach a great deal. I think it seems like a volume question, I guess, as much as anything. If anything, our approach is, proved to be, to have stood the test of time. In some ways, I think, our approach is to, gather the facts in a particular way so that we can make politically useful analysis at the end of the day, and to second guess and verify, any and all claims that we or others, may make. So there may be more claims now that are misleading or nefarious or otherwise, have ulterior motives. But, our mission to verify those claims, remains. If anything, the demand for our approach has increased because the approach itself is sound. Certainly, we have tons of new tools at our disposal, just as the machines can write nefarious content at a much faster rate. They can also detect themselves at a much higher rate than humans. So pretty soon we'll just be machines talking to other machines, and we will just be able to kick back and sit on a beach or something, I guess. But I think the fundamental principles of what it is that we do remain, even if the tools and the means have changed.
Great. And then Taylor, I'll go to you next. How has your approach, I guess, changed at all in this kind of era of disinformation, or is it sticking to the tried and true, long time standing research practices?
I think it's a bit of both. One thing we've really been doing a lot of exploring on over the past year at JM has been the tech tools that are available to us. Things like facial recognition. What can we use to determine if a video is a deep fake? Those are all areas that we've really been trying to look into to see if that's something that can supplement our work. But beyond that, I think Alan was right. A lot of it has just stayed the same. We are maybe a bit more important to campaigns because they need us to understand what is reality and what isn't. But it's always been our job to put our own findings through the ringer. I think the best researchers are the ones that question their own work. Will it stand up to scrutiny? Are there holes? And if so, can we patch them? Or are they just too big? What pushback could the opponent say? So this era of disinformation has probably reminded us and emphasized that opposition research is just a fact-finding mission. We always try to exercise that caution anyway with any information that we're taking in and telling a campaign, hey, this is usable, you should try to run on it. And now we just kind of need to remember to question those facts even more in what we're seeing. But that's always been there, and I think it's been a hallmark of good opposition research.
Absolutely. And same question to you, Sonia. Has anything in your, anything in your toolkit changed over the last, 8 or so years, or is it more so, standing on those true principles and moving forward in that way?
I will echo what both Taylor and Alan said. It's a little bit of both. I mean, the principles are and have always been sound. You know, as both Alan and Taylor mentioned, the tools have changed and become more interesting and more evolved. And you know, as AI starts to grow and change, you know, we're incorporating that into the way we do our work. But something that Alan said that I really do want to touch on is the volume. And I'm not quite sure if he was talking about volume in terms of the number of campaigns who are now hiring opposition researchers, professional oppo shops, because you know the job is getting dirtier and messier and more faster paced, or if he was talking specifically about the volume with which we project what we find. Because, and we've already talked a little bit about this, people are inundated every day with news stories, and you know some of them are legitimate, but I have been on the internet and I have seen the metric tons of BS that is pushed out, you know, as content with vaguely official looking headlines and vaguely official designs that can easily sucker people in. And part of the problem is that they're not outright lies. Like, it is not, you know, Donald Trump is actually an alien, which if you ask anyone on this call, that's really up for debate. But besides, but there are things that are being pushed out that are just plausible enough that people just sort of adopt it. And because it comes under an official looking logo with an official looking banner, it's easy to believe. And so part of the problem is, once we do have the actual facts and the actual information, projecting that into the universe with enough volume and enough consistency to make a dent it's a daunting task. But again, all the more reason to do this research early when you can get us cheap.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, you know, for maybe some early career researchers, and I'll start with you, Taylor, you know, when you're evaluating either what's going in an opposition research book or maybe, you know, fact checking a hit, you know, what should an early career researcher be looking for to verify their information, and how would someone who's maybe new to the industry go about, you know, discerning fact from fiction?
Yeah, you know, the obvious answer, just to start off, would be we always start with those trusted sources. You know, the tools at the heart of our research are either vetted and trusted secondary sources like newspapers, legislative information, or whenever we can, we always try to go directly to the source. You know, audio and video of a candidate can be one of the best things we can find, or transcripts or direct litigation documents. I think I've heard it to anyone here who's a fan of the show House. You know, one of his mantras is "the patient always lies." And that's something that I've heard in research as well, is you should be questioning what's in front of you, as you should in media literacy in general. But our job as a researcher is to understand how the sausage was made. We want to understand the process that led to something so that we can question it, so that we can scrutinize it, and so we can determine whether or not it's actually viable and true. And I think being willing to go down some of those rabbit holes a bit and trust your gut when something seems a little bit off is one of the best tools that a new researcher can have to really get confident in their work.
Yeah, and then on question two, I'll go to Sonia next. So, you know, what Taylor's talking about is trusting those gut instincts. How have you kind of developed maybe some early career staff or that you've had over the years in developing those research instincts? Do people come to you with those instincts already developed, or have you had to help researchers kind of develop those instincts over time?
It's a little of both. You know, one of the things that I have found is that hiring people who have already worked in journalism is fantastic, because they are suspicious of everything. You know, they are having to double and triple check their work. A lot of times when it comes to early research, though, we find it's best to hire them like fresh out of college and train them from jump, because they don't accidentally pick up bad habits and things of that nature. But, you know, as with anything else, experience is the best teacher. And the more you dive into these things and the more you sort of, you know, question the validity of statements, question the validity of sources, question the validity of everything, you know, the better you're going to get at it. You know, Taylor's already talked about how, like, you know, primary source documents, if it's a publicly available record, if I can go to a courthouse and get this record or this document or this, you know, what have you, and wave it around and be like, no, this is the proof, you know, that's a wonderful thing. And that gives, you know, that certainly gives us the confidence to put, you know, that kind of information into our reports and be like, yes, I stand by this. But, you know, a lot of times it's just, I mean, as with anything, ask ask more questions. And then after that, ask more questions. Ask questions of the individuals in play. Ask questions of other researchers. Ask questions, of the sources and the websites and the publications. Just keep asking questions. That is the best way to develop your instincts.
Great. And then Alan, same question to you. How over your career have you kind of developed those early research instincts in young professionals, and what should young professionals kind of be looking towards to develop those research skills?
Yeah, I mean, we look for, curiosity and inquisitiveness and those kind of things, so kind of exactly what Sonia noted, whatever you can do to develop those kind of skills is going to be good. You should question the source of any information that you see. We look for folks who have experience in fields that would promote those kinds of things. So folks who have experience in journalism or backgrounds in journalism is a great example. That's the primary profession, that we look for, or not even profession if it's, young people or undergrads, folks in journalism schools or in schools that promote, a high degree of skill in, written communication. So communications folks or English folks or other kinds of degrees of that nature for undergrads. But really, I mean, at the end of the line, it really just is a matter of practice, so, understanding how to separate a complex piece of information into its component claims, and then figuring out how to document each of those with the most reputable source that you can find, like Taylor noted, preferably a primary source wherever possible, and a reputable secondary source where it's not. And there's not a lot that you can do beyond practicing, but starting with a certain level of folks who do not take a thing as it is presented or as it is written is really kind of the instinct that you're looking for, I think.
Great. And I kind of want to now pivot the conversation to, diversity, equity, and inclusion in research and the political space. So February was Black History Month and March is Women's History Month. And the theme of Women's History Month this year is diversity, equity, inclusion. In recent years, there's been a lot of democratic investment in diversifying talent, especially thanks to organizations like Gain Power and the DNC. Politics has historically precluded women and people of color from entering the industry. And I think that is especially obvious in the research space. So how have you tried to either attract more diverse talent in your firms? And what has been your process for, I suppose there's no better word, diversifying the kind of talent pipeline to your firms? And I'll start with Sonia.
Yeah, happy to jump on this one. Am I muted? No, I'm not muted. Great. So we have actually been really, really fortunate. My business partner at Sanford Campaigns is a straight white dude, and he is one of two straight white dudes at our firm. Now, we're a small firm. We have a member of the LGBT community. We have a member of the disabled community. I am a Latina. But we're a 5-person shop. So the really wonderful thing about us is that when in the rare circumstances where it is time to hire someone, we are already plugged into the clubs and organizations at schools that promote those kinds of programs. We make it a point of listing. We are particularly interested in communities who are not necessarily represented in the opposition research field. And that, we've been very fortunate to just sort of back our way into that. But it is something that we have to, make a very concerted effort now, going forward. And we certainly will. But the fact is, we are already sort of plugged in. We already have a great baseline going for us in terms of past hires. So we just keep walking that particular line.
Great. Alan, and then I'll pitch it over to you. Has your firm kind of looked for diversity, equity, inclusion in the talent pipeline?
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of work, is what I would say. If you do the minimum and you put the opportunities out there, just by the nature of this country, you're going to get mostly not diverse talent pool. So, what we learned a while ago was, you have to really work very hard to be, purposeful about going out there and finding, we're already looking for such a niche kind of talent that we kind of described in the previous segment, and then to look for that same kind of talent, those folks who are curious, inquisitive, those folks who are super good writers, maybe they have journalism backgrounds or writing backgrounds or whatever it may be, and then to find diverse communities on several different axes within that space is it takes a lot of work. So we're super purposeful about going out and finding those kind of communities and making sure that we speak to them when it does come time to do the hiring. So looking for communities of journalists or journalism students who are diverse, looking for university clubs or university groups or whatever it might be of diverse students who might be interested in politics, young Democratic clubs at wherever or in particular geographies or universities that may have diverse communities of folks who would be interested in this kind of work. You have to be super intentional about seeking out those kind of places, because they may not necessarily pick up if you just post it on the usual job boards, even on the some of the political job boards. We may not get as diverse a pipeline, Alyssa, as you probably know, we may not get as diverse of a pipeline as we might want. So we have to do all of those things, and then in addition, go seek out places that will bring us a more diverse pipeline. And even then, it's still I would argue even still, we don't probably get as diverse of a pipeline as I would probably like. So it's super challenging. It's a lot of work. I think even the big firms that I know of, tend, I think, to underestimate just how much work it can be just to get in that first step of just getting a diverse applicant pool, to say nothing of moving diverse folks successfully through a pipeline. So, but it's possible if you want to put in the work. As Sonia described, it can definitely be done. The space is certainly more diverse now than it was when I started. I would argue it's probably not as diverse as we might like, but we're small improvements, I think, are the name of the game. So,
absolutely,
we're going in the right direction, I would argue.
Absolutely. And then, Taylor, do you have anything that you want to add? I know you're not in charge of maybe hiring, or are you?
I am involved in the fellowship process
a
bit, which I'd be happy to talk about, because I think this is something we as a firm and as senior staff have thought about a lot. And I think a lot of the ways that we've done our hiring has been shaped by this in recent years. So one thing I would mention is that fellowship program, which we've really designed in a way to hopefully attract a more diverse talent pool. As I'm sure everyone knows, one of the biggest barriers to entry in politics is the ability to, maybe when you're in college, go down to DC or hop on a campaign and work as an intern unpaid for months, just to get your foot in the door and be able to have some experience to slap on your resume. And that arrangement is something that, we all know really benefits people who come from privileged backgrounds, and sort of starts a pipeline that's closed off to so many people right from the get. So creating a fellowship that is, fully remote and paid, and which is the primary path through which we hire our full-time staff. We're at a point where the majority of our firm now, myself included, have gone through the fellowship program, has definitely improved our ability to attract those more diverse employees, along with what Sonia and Alan mentioned, which is, past political experience is not the number one thing we're looking for. It's not going to make or break your application to get your foot in the door with research. What we're looking for is that enthusiasm, that inquisitiveness, that desire to be willing to come here and learn research and see if it's the right thing for you. We can teach someone to review news clips and court records. That's all teachable, and we don't take that for granted with the people we're hiring to hopefully make that pool more open to people who just didn't have the privileged background to be set up for that before they get to us.
Absolutely. Great. Well, now I want to thank you so much for answering those questions. I kind of want to take some time now as we wrap up here and close, to now pivot and talk about the 2024 election and beyond. So we're actually going to go back to something that Sonia mentioned at the top of the hour, and talk a little bit about that investment piece in opposition research. So, Sonia, as you mentioned, candidates and campaign staffers need to really be strategic with where they spend their funds. Why does 2024 stand out as a year for Democrats to invest in really thorough opposition research? And I'll start with you, Sonia.
People lie. I'm not going to name names because I think we all know who I'm probably referring to, but candidates sometimes lie. Sometimes they don't do it especially well. Sometimes they're really clumsy about it. I've had the misfortune. I've had the opportunity to do research on candidates who were just known for lying. They can't open their mouth without lying. They are incapable of speaking without spewing BS. And those candidates are fun, but the problem with it is that it really does muddy the waters for the rest of the candidates running for any kind of office anywhere. We have gotten deep into a period where voters assume that everyone's lying. I mean, absolutely everyone. You could be Jesus Christ, and still people will be like, well, if he's running for office, he's probably pretty shady. And there's something to that, but it's simply because we have gotten to a point where people are not inclined to believe much of anything from anyone. It is so important that we are able to point to verifiable sources that other people can find on their own. And that's something we haven't really touched on, and I will just really quickly. Opposition research, we are not specially licensed, okay? We do not have access to databases that other people can't get access to. We are not, we're not, specially licensed. We don't have permits or what have you. It is all publicly available information. And so when I am able to say, no, here's the proof, there it is. All I have to do is provide some kind of citation and the viewer can go and confirm it for themselves. That's how they know that I am not utterly full of crap. And that I think is a really, really important thing to sort of lean on, because we are as we've discussed, an era of disinformation, and people are inclined to believe what makes them feel good, and really, really inclined to disbelieve anything that makes them not feel good. So, the more that we can talk about the fact that we are not just telling the truth, we are telling the truth in a way that is really, really easy for you to go and verify yourself, I feel like is a really, really important thing for us to lean on in 2024, perhaps more than, any other election before, except maybe 2020.
And then Taylor, same question to you. Why does this year stand out to you as a year for more investment in opposition research, and if so, why?
Absolutely. I think part of it is just breaking through the noise. As Sonia mentioned earlier, in an ideal world, we could run our campaigns on policy and all of the positives about our candidate and all of their strengths. And that is still a big part of it. But unfortunately, that's just not enough anymore. Democrats have often been the party that doesn't get too cynical compared to the Republicans. The Republicans were more than willing to kind of go that route, to not run on policy. And I think a big part of opposition research is moving away from that idea that it's just finding the smears that you can have, and it's just being prepared. Knowing your opponent's weaknesses, how their weaknesses highlight your strengths, how it fits into your messaging, how it can really just strengthen a campaign all around and not just be a single hit that you put out there and hope to tank them. I think understanding that kind of wraparound aspect of research and how important it is with news cycles that move on in a day, and that maybe aren't as shocked by things that they used to be shocked by. It's very important to kind of be armed with that knowledge and that information to really be able to break through just an onslaught of information or disinformation, regardless of whether or not it's true. People are getting fed it 24/7. And research is really important to make sure your stuff lands.
Absolutely. And then same question to you, Alan. What sticks out to you about 2024 and opposition research and investment?
Yeah, I think I think we've covered, I think, most of the standout points, that make this year a little bit unique. The volume of information that is coming at folks, and how much of that can be for nefarious purposes or from nefarious sources that are attempting to hide. So sussing that out is going to require significantly more investment. Being the first presidential election post Roe being overturned, I think, is a big one. I suspect there will be a ton of investment in that space. Biden is certainly going to make that the centerpiece of his campaign, and probably rightly so. So, another trip back through the time machine to unravel all of the records of all of these folks on abortion issues, that may not have been the top of the of the list of their prior election, especially if it was 4 or more years ago, is going to be at the top of the ticket now. At the top of the list of issues now. So that kind of investment will need to be there as well. And then, of course, investment in new tools, I think, is going to be a big one this year. I'm certain we'll see the presidential campaigns using all kinds of new tools in research, or at least we'll see the fruits of that. They may not actually talk about it, but we'll see the rise of the machines and the automation, in the form of a presidential campaign for the first time in 2024. So we'll see who are the first ones to get successful at it, and who are the first ones to be unsuccessful and to get called out for it. So it should be a good time.
Absolutely. And then, kind of speaking about this, the budgets of campaigns, especially maybe even smaller ones, like smaller than House races, for example, how should campaign managers, candidates, and otherwise staffers, at what point how do they decide whether they should get professional opposition research, from one of you lovely folks, or take the chance of going it on their own? And I'll start with Taylor.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and one I'd be interested in hearing Sonia and Alan's answers as well, because they might have a bit more insight. But I think one thing to keep in mind is that when we say, you're hiring someone for opposition research, that doesn't necessarily mean you're buying the big, complete book that scrutinizes everything in a person's record, and it's the most expensive, option on the table. I think there's always value in maybe a small retainer. I think a professional firm could help a lot with the rapid response, or things like fact-checking polls and assisting with the messaging there. A lot of that value just comes from the expertise of working on other races. A professional firm is a bit less myopic in their view, and can provide that insight of what we're seeing in other races. And even if it's in a limited capacity, if it's just due diligence, if it's a full book, if it's a retainer, whatever it might be, there's always a value add to that outside voice and that outside expertise that's kind of done it and been around the block a bunch of times. So I think recognizing that firms are willing to work with campaigns and work with clients to see how they can best meet their needs, and it's not always one size fits all, would just be an important thing to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Sonia, I'll throw it over to you. What is that distinction of how campaigns should decide whether to go it alone and try to go it alone, or whether to hire outside, professional assistance?
If at all possible, hire a professional. I mean, if at all possible. And I know that's not necessarily what people are going to want to hear. And I fully appreciate that sometimes there simply is not money for a professional oppo shop. We are expensive. But, we are expensive for a reason. It's because, just between the three of us here, there are how many decades of political research experience under our belt, right? And it's not that we have, again, it's not that we have special access. It's not that we, know magical things. It's that we have literally done this all over the country at every level of government. There just aren't a lot of things that surprise us anymore. Now, I fully appreciate that, a lot of times, someone's research budget for a campaign, especially on smaller races, school board, city council, things of that nature, or if you're, living in a district where there are really, really severe, fundraising or individual donation limits, I get that can be problematic for sure. But as Taylor mentioned, there are options for, sort of smaller retainers. I am happy to sit down with smaller campaigns and talk you through some of the things that you should be looking at and some of the things that you could be looking at. Even if I'm not the one doing it, I'm happy to sort of point people in the right direction. But, and again, this goes to hiring us early, particularly if you get us on board earlier. We're going to give you a break in price, and also research can always be scaled. Now, you do run into problems. George Santos is a great example of this, right? Like, there wasn't a ton of money invested specifically in opposition research in that race. And we've already covered the myriad reasons, why that was. But, research can always be scaled. Do you have $20,000? Awesome. Do you have $2,000? Significantly less awesome, but that doesn't mean that there isn't research to be done. So, at the very least, even if you don't think you have a budget for professional research, get some proposals. If I've got nothing to do for a week, if I've got a couple of analysts cooling their heels, and you've got a few $100 here or there to spend, chances are there's a researcher out there who is willing to help you out in one way or another. So never be afraid to ask is where I'll leave that.
Absolutely. And then Alan, same question to you. Do you have anything to add in this regard?
No, I think Sonia nailed it. It doesn't hurt to ask, right? It can certainly be scaled. There's always retainers or hourly rates that you can do. If you can scrape together even a few $1,000s, as Sonia noted, it is highly worth it, if for nothing else than sitting down for a few hours and chatting through what you might want to look for a particular candidate, and then having yourself or an intern or whoever do the legwork of that. Even that small engagement would be well worth it to avoid whatever huge headache it is down the road, just because you forego a 2-hour conversation or whatever it is. So do whatever the very minimum you can afford, at least. But any engagement with a professional firm is going to be worth it.
Great. And then to close this off, our last question here. Looking ahead beyond 2024. Regards to whatever happens this year, how do you think that opposition research is going to change, or the industry, or how will the industry change, do you think, before the end of the decade? And I'll start with Alan.
End of the decade?
End of the decade. Between now and 2030. What do you think?
Yeah, at the rate we're going by 2030, we will all be retired, and it'll just be machines running our democracy. So we won't have to worry about that. I would say in the next couple of years, I think the technological transformation that's going on right now it's very early, so it's difficult to tell, but it'll almost certainly be super disruptive to kind of everything we do. But having machines that can program other machines to do the things that we want them to do is going to make at least some of the mundane things in any industry, but in research like all the rest, it is going to sort of take some of the mundane things off the table for the humans, and we'll be able to give those to machines, and that'll leave the humans to be good at doing the things that our humans are good at. Humans will be left to be able to do to use human intellect, to use human judgment, to use human creativity, to do all those kinds of creative things, and have the machines read huge Lexis dumps or sift through 8 billion court cases or whatever it is, right? So I think that is kind of the direction that we're going. Like for the end user, I think it's going to the last question. It's going to have the effect of making more options available at lower cost for the end consumer. So as where a research book would have been out of the question for a city council race a few years ago, this year or next, a research book will probably be in the cards. I probably wouldn't recommend, at least not now, using an AI-generated research book for a $100,000 paid communications campaign. But that will, the machines will get better, and they can, like I said, they can reprogram themselves on the fly, so they can learn to fact check things. And once you have machines that can learn to do things, lots of things become possible that we wouldn't have thought possible before. So, by the 2026 election, there's probably an AI-generated research book that's reasonably decent. Are you going to bet your life on it even then? I don't know. But but that's coming. So yeah, so it's going to be a wild world of super fast technological change. There will be some significant failures that will be spectacularly newsworthy for a day or two each, and then we'll get better at it, and it should be fun to watch.
Yeah. Same question to you, Taylor. What do you think? What do you foresee? Between now and we'll say 2030, in changes in the either technological or otherwise kind of field of opposition research?
Yeah, well, for now, I'm going to continue to relish the stories about ChatGPT making some major error because I would like to stall that taking all of our jobs for now. I kind of enjoy when it gets it wrong. But, I think it's interesting. One thing I've seen outside of the technology aspect is people hiring opposition researchers much earlier in the election cycle than I'd previously seen. Maybe in part due to just more money in campaigns or recognition that opposition research is valuable at like the primary level. I think seeing people bring it in early and earlier and make it kind of a core part of the launch of their campaign and the entire story is one thing we might see. Yeah. And I think the flip side of technology with younger and younger candidates is just different things we're reviewing that I find very interesting. When we have a millennial or maybe even once Gen Z starts joining, their entire footprint is online. They might not have extensive property records or an extensive, background in politics, but there's a whole new world of things that we have to review because they sort of lived on the internet and maybe weren't using traditional news sources to get their things out. And kind of what can we find and how do we evolve with our candidates to make sure that we're keeping pace with what's out there on them as they live in kind of a more digital world. And there's just new sources online that we need to dig through.
Absolutely. And then last to you, Sonia. Between now and the 2030, what do you see?
Just nothing but potential, right? I'm probably one of the only people that looks at AI and isn't like thoroughly afraid that Skynet is going to erupt on us tomorrow. But as Taylor mentioned, AI is still it's still growing, it's still learning, and it is still a tool. And we have seen several moments, in the course of human history where a new tool suddenly showed up and we thought they were going to make humans obsolete. And that cannot be done. It is not possible. The internet came along and we thought, well, that's going to put a lot of things out of business. And all it did was redirect business. There are always, new things that humans, have to oversee and have to take care of and manage. And so, ChatGPT, I've played around it. It's really, really fun. I would never in a million years trust it to do research for me. Not even close. And that's fine, but I am looking forward to seeing where AI goes in the next, I imagine that by the end of the decade, we're going to see just incredible leaps forward in terms of what we can do, what we can look at, how quickly, and most importantly, how quickly we can analyze all the data that is being thrown at us day in and day out. I am particularly interested in space exploration, and back in the 60s and 70s when we were routinely sending big old rockets into space, there was this idea that mission control were the people on the ground who were responsible for everything. And as missions go further and further and deeper into space, especially crewed missions, we're going to move away from the model of mission control to mission support, because we're going to have the new technology and we're not going to be able to engage with it while it's that far away. That's sort of how I see the coming technology, right? Like, we may not be the ones in full control, but we are absolutely going to be the ones overseeing all of this, even if it is, from a bit of a remove. So, in terms of opposition researchers, human beings, we're not going anywhere, not anytime soon. And again, we're cheaper if you hire us early.
Yes. And then I did see one question in the chat, which we've already answered. If anybody else has any questions, I'll pause here for a second and let us kind of ask any questions you'd like. And we're coming up here on the end. Okay. Not seeing any questions come up.
Don't be shy, folks. Clearly, I just had a second cup of coffee here. I'm ready to go.
I know. I love it. Love the energy. Okay. Well, I will pivot then and close this out and get everybody back to their day. So I'll start with you, Taylor. Plug anything exciting, personal, professional that y'all are working on. If you want, you can drop your email in the chat, and we can get folks directed to you who are maybe working on some campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. I will drop my email in the chat. You know, I mentioned the fellowship program earlier. We tend to hire that every couple cycles, so that's probably going to open back up, or every couple months, I mean. So that's probably going to open back up, you know, soon in April. So if anyone's interested in breaking into research, that's something I would heavily promote. Like I said earlier, no past hardcore experience is required. Just be interested, just come join. And it's a great way, I think, to move through the ranks, especially in something like research where it's a pretty small field. And beyond that, yeah, happy to talk to anybody if anyone has any other questions or just wants to chat and connect afterwards.
Great. And then Sonia, anything that you want to plug personally or professionally?
Not specifically. I was actually thinking about this right before we hopped on. We have been generally speaking, because, you know, it requires a bigger budget to do bigger budget research. We generally work on, you know, a lot of statewide, a lot of congressional, things of that nature. But lately, we have seen a pretty significant increase in the number of school board races that we have been doing. And that's kind of surprising because school boards up until recently have not necessarily been thought of as particularly partisan. But I know that, you know, there has been a lot of conservative financial investment in these races, precisely because they want to see the kind of fights that we have been seeing at the, you know, in school, you know, about who's allowed to teach, what are we allowed to teach, what kind of books should be allowed in our libraries. So I will say I'm really psyched that I'm starting to see those candidates and those endeavors and initiatives, you know, investing considerably in opposition research. And if there are folks out there who are looking to break into political research, and you can't necessarily get started with the, you know, the D-Trip or, you know, a campaign in particular, or a candidate campaign in particular, I might suggest, you know, starting on some of those races, seeing if you can get involved in some of those races, because that's, you know, it's a very new and very strange battleground. And there are so very many school boards out there, and we can't work them all. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for being here. I will say and plug for myself, we have actually been working on this AI project pretty soon, and we are about to launch our prototype and MVP ahead of 2024. It's called Rival Mind AI. Our email is actually going out today with the announcement, and that's for purchase you know, that will be available to researchers on this call and candidates and campaigns who maybe don't have money. So please email me if you want to learn more. And thank you both so much for being here today. I have loved hearing your expertise and sharing your and hearing, you know, your perspectives on this. And thank you again so much. And thank you, everybody. We'll see you later.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.